Yeah, because we can kind of think going into, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like the midwife, the doctor, they know what to do. But really, when like a generation of women can start encouraging other women that you can and you are capable of this and you are powerful enough to know how to birth your baby, that you don't need a doctor to tell you what position to get in and whether you should be leaning back with stirrups or whether like if you want to go lean over a medicine ball and sway your hips, like your body probably wants to do that. That's what you need to do.
Welcome back to the Mind Change podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. And today I'm so excited to have one of my best friends in the whole wide world and also just an amazing mentor and woman in the space of wellness and health and livelihood and birth and all good things, mother of five, Ellen Fisher.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yay! I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. Excited for this conversation.
Really great. Okay, so we're going to talk about all kinds of things probably, but for sure I want to talk about birth.
Let's do it.
Because as people have probably heard the story at this point, you are the reason that there is even a birth course, that I've even done sessions with people on birth. I would have never thought to apply it until you.
So cool.
I know.
I love it.
So explain with your words, because I've told the story a bunch of times too. Mm-hmm. So what do you feel like happened?
So we were neighbors at the time. Sad we're not neighbors anymore, but It was the best. And I was pregnant with my third child. And I had two amazing first home births. Loved them. Totally empowering, but they were definitely long and definitely painful. And I had done the hypnobirthing course in my first pregnancy before, hoping I could have a pain-free birth that was gentle. And once I got in the height of labor, in my first labor, I remember looking at my husband and my midwife and saying, this hypnobirthing is bullshit. I was like, this is a load of crap. I feel this terribly. So I just felt so out of control, and it felt just at the whim of whatever my body was doing, and there was nothing I could do about it. But births were amazing, and that, the reward of your baby on your chest, like it was beautiful, But then my second labor, I was always told, oh, the second one goes faster. It's easier. It's going to be so much easier, And I'm like, oh, great. That would be great. And yet here I, again, did the exact, almost to a T, the same birth of my first birth. And in hindsight, everything happens the way it's supposed to. And I'm glad that it happened that way, because if it hadn't, like if I had met you and I was pregnant with my second, when we did Mind Change, it could have easily been chalked up to, oh, second births are easier and they just consecutively get easier and easier. But my first two were like, it was not like that for me. And so it was a real testament for me once I did go through, Mind Change with you and my third, of how drastically different it was. So I was really pregnant, about to give birth, just a couple weeks due, or maybe even like a week due. And
it was a week, yeah.
Yeah, and we were chatting outside or something, and I said, I would just love if this birth was quicker and easier. And you said, well, you could do that, And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, we could do some mind work and rewire those neural pathways, and why don't you just sit down with me in camp for a couple hours and we'll do a session on you and you can have the birth that you want. And I was so skeptical, but I was definitely willing to try it. I'm like, okay, let's give this a shot. So I really remember the two of you together doing some weird session on me. And I like, what are we doing? Why are we tapping? But it felt so emotional. And I remember, starting to feel contractions, or what we were calling waves or pressure. I forget what words we were using at that point for the third birth, but you asked me to specifically say how long I wanted my birth to be and what I wanted it to feel like. And at one point I remember saying, well, it would be so great if I could just, like some of those women where they stand on their balcony drinking a cup of tea and they look down and their baby's crowning. I said, I would love that. And you're like, well, but are there any problems with doing it that way? Is there anything you don't want about doing it that way? And I said, well, I guess then the midwife wouldn't get there in time. I really do want my midwife there. I really want a birth photographer here this time. So, okay, I need a little bit more time. So he said, okay, so how many hours to get everything you want? And I remember we said somewhere between 6 and 8 hours, or was it 8 to 10? I can't remember.
I think it was 8 to 10 on the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been 8. Yeah, 8 to 10. That felt realistic to me because my first two were 24 and 26 hours long. So I was like, okay, let's do 8 to 10 hours. Let's just be a little realistic. And we wanted the waves to feel like the contractions to feel like waves and to be smiling and excited and happy and enjoying birth, which felt so foreign to me because I definitely didn't enjoy it the first 2 times. And I remember I got exactly what I asked for, what I wanted, what I said I wanted. My birth was exactly 8 hours long. My labor was not painful. I was so shocked how it felt. I was at a point where I was on the bed. It had been probably 6 hours in or 7 hours in. And my midwife had just gotten there. She was there for my second birth, so she remembered how long it was. And she didn't even, you know how midwives are. They just know. All they have to do is look at you, and they don't have to do anything. They know how long you are. And that can be either very defeating or very exciting because when they come, they go, oh, you got a long way to go, honey. It's like, oh, what? How do you know? Are you sure? And so when you think you're so much farther along. So she came, she's like, oh, you're really doing it. You're almost there. Like, you're almost there. She just knew based on the moans I was making and how I was just in my body at that moment, how intense it felt. Yeah, I was smiling and laughing somehow. And so once she checked me, and I think I was 8 centimeters or something like that, I was really close, and I was just laughing. I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing it. But to back up a little bit, when I started going into labor, Andrew and I went on a walk, and I think I had the kids go to your house.
Yeah.
Elvis and Sandy. And we went on a walk and we were intimate together to try to like get things going. Because the first 2, I never would have imagined being intimate. It was like repulsive to me. Like the thought of doing that while I'm in labor. Even my midwife on my first one said, oh, like go and be intimate. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, right. But the third one felt different because I had this mindset shift about it, So that helped kick it along. And then there was a point where it started to feel painful. And I said, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. I'm failing. Something's wrong. I'm not doing it right. And you had said, call me if you feel like any at all, like you want to talk. And so I just started to get nervous, and then it started to feel more painful because I was like clenching. I wasn't relaxing. I wasn't just choosing to enjoy it. I was hiding from it. And that's when it started to really feel painful in that moment. The sun, I think, was setting, and you came outside to talk to me, and you just gave me this pep talk. Like, you can choose what it feels like. This is your choice. You can, I forget the words you said, but it was such a powerful moment between us where I went through a couple waves where it actually started to feel better because I chose to let it go and relax and open into it and not hide from it. And then it start feeling better. So that's when it kicked it up a notch again. You went back home, and then it was, it was basically almost over at that point. It went so fast. I remember at one point I was like, how am I going to decide when to do my birth? Because I really felt like I decided when exactly I was going to do it and how and where and what. And I realized the only reason it was starting to get to the 8-hour mark was because I wasn't choosing to do the steps that I needed to get everything I wanted to have birth. So I thought, oh, I need to call the midwife. I need to call the photographer, and then I can give birth. And as soon as I did that, I was like, okay, I'm going to give birth now. I was like, I'm going to go outside and have one contraction, looking at the moon, because that's what I did with my last right before I gave birth to. And then I'm going to get in the birthing tub and I'm going to give birth. That's exactly what happened. The photographer barely had time to set up the camera. And Andrew at one point was like, are you sure you want to call the photographer yet? I'm like, yes, because I'll give birth as soon as she gets here. And that's exactly what happened. And it was so transformative. I felt so powerful. Like I wasn't just out of control this time. I felt in control of my body, but in a beautiful, good way, like a harmony. And then my baby was a girl, and it was our first girl. We had 2 boys, and then having a girl was a surprise. It was just the most euphoric moment ever. And I just was crying and laughing and just so happy that I did it the way I wanted to do it. It was beautiful.
Oh, it was so amazing.
Amazing.
I always tell people that was a life-changing experience for me, hearing when Scout came into the world. It really did something and changed something inside of me too. So that power of the power of change, so amazing. You said something earlier that I think is interesting and is part of this. you were like, people say, I mean, there's so many stories, right? People say the second one's easier, shorter. You know, there's another story that first ones are always going to be tough. And you're like, you're always going to have a hard time on the first one. And there are just so many stories that we hear. And yet, isn't it funny how I don't know about you, when you were first giving birth, home births and everything, which I did not know those were possible in my frame of reference. I didn't know that was an option. I thought that was something that happened as a mistake. Now I know very differently. But did you hear any good stories? Like, did you hear very many good stories when you were like pregnant with Elvis or Sandy? Or what were some of the stories that that you see now played into maybe the way that your first two births went?
Well, I definitely heard positive stories, and so I wanted that. But it's almost like when we went to the mind change session, what was the reason why I couldn't do that? And it felt like I had to have a long and painful labor for it to be, I don't know, like a rite of passage. Like it was good work. Like it was good to do those things. And that's what gives you the baby at the end. So it wasn't like I was looking at birth as a bad thing in my first two, but I didn't feel like what other births I had heard of, some of those births where you hear that it was easy, I didn't feel like something I was able to do. Like, oh, they're just the freak of nature, and I don't know why I'm not able to do that, but I'm definitely not one of those people. Not freak of nature in a bad way, but just an awesome way. Because I did hypnobirthing with my first, and there were 4 women in the class, and it was all our first time giving birth. And afterwards, we met up with our kids, and 2 of them said that it was pain-free, and the other 2 said that it wasn't. It was all our first. And I just was so shocked. I'm like, what? I think you're lying. Like, I was like, you did not feel what I felt. There's no way that was what you felt. And you said that it was pain-free. And it didn't make sense to me because it almost felt like a rite of passage that your first birth is supposed to be really hard.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Because it's like something for women to relate to. Like, oh, see, you get it now. It's so hard, right? But if a woman says, oh, it was so easy, it's almost like a diss or something for some women. To feel, not like a diss, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That actually, it speaks against our power. That it's got to be this laborious, hard rite of passage so that we can relate in pain.
Yeah.
About birth.
Yeah, interesting.
And how sad that that's the connotation we have just generally accepted around bringing a life into the world. Is that it's this awful, grueling, painful experience that, well, in the end, I get a baby and then it's great because I
got the baby.
When now you've done it both ways. Maybe you didn't do the grueling, you had great births.
No, but I did. I was just in agony.
Right, but the agony of it.
Yeah, I was just looking at someone to save me. Oh, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? This is horrible. I was definitely in that.
And then the power that we give the midwives to that degree, like you said, they can come in and be like, you're almost there.
Yeah.
You're nowhere close.
Yeah.
That is that kind of, we feel out of control is what you said.
It's giving your power away a little bit. Cause
yes.
I remember at one point I asked in my second labor to my midwife, when is it? Is it almost over? When's it going to be here? And she goes, you're one contraction closer to your birth. And I was like, oh, this is so annoying. Like, that was so annoying to me to hear. I'm like, that's not what I want to hear.
Right. Because we want to hear that, there's an end in sight to the pain. So you had Scout. It was a shift, like a complete paradigm shift for you, right? And then I remember we did a little video together, and I think that you said I had my pain-free birth or something, right? And how do you feel like people responded to that?
I think it was largely positive. I mean, I don't look at comments that much because I don't find it very helpful for my life to do that. I kind of have a rule of thumb for me where at least now, I didn't used to, but where when I post a video or anything, or I post anything online, I'll scroll through maybe the comments in the very beginning, like the first hour, because that tends to be the people who are your supporters, who they really genuinely would love for you to read this supportive comment. And it's encouraging, and I love words, and then I kind of put it away and don't look most of the time. I mean, I'm not perfect, but most of the time.
So wise.
But I do think that it was mostly positive, but there was definitely people kind of accusing me of lying. And that is kind of still online today. Like there's more empowering birth content online now where you see all these beautiful births where they're intense and they're hard, but they're also at the same time beautiful and easy. And then there's ones where they're easier and not as hard. And every birth is so different, right? There's so many different ways to give birth and none of it is wrong or bad. But sometimes if a woman is claiming that her birth wasn't painful and it was pain-free or just intense, like that can trigger people because that's not what they felt. And they might think like you're lying or you're twisting words to make it seem like something that wasn't, Yeah. I've seen that online.
There was a client, an individual who posted after work and, that this birth was pain-free and it was beautiful and all of these things, and saw in the comments that she just got attacked. And I thought, and there was a midwife in the comment section actually saying that this is irresponsible for her to share. And I thought, oh my goodness. I feel like that's very sad that we're in a culture that it's said that it's irresponsible for someone to share their joy and their experience if it isn't tragedy and it isn't horrific or hard or brutal to some degree. Why are we so okay with the brutal stories but not okay with hearing the ones that are possibly a different narrative?
I think it comes from a place of good intention because midwives might see a mother going into it expecting it to be easy. And then when it's not, that can make it disappointing, and maybe causing trauma that didn't need to be there. Right. So the human brain is so unique and interesting. It's so complex. So everyone's going to take stories in different ways. So I understand where that person or midwife might be coming from. I've seen comments like that too. Like, oh, well, births just get easier with each consecutive birth. So this is irresponsible to say that kind of thing. But that's just not but actually that's not true. There's so many women who might say this one was easier, the next one was harder. And what's different about those ones? Was your life situation different? Were you with a different partner? Were you more supported? Was your partner supportive of your birth this third time around, but the other time, that is going to affect how you go into birth. Like your situation, your setting is going to affect a lot in your birth. So to just chalk it up to chance is, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, obviously.
It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't hold water long term because you can always find many people who don't follow that particular story. But it's interesting that I'm even thinking through my evolution of working with you through this stuff, because originally what struck me was that you were talking about your births being painful. And I was deep in writing the book at the time. And so I was like, pain is just communication. So even in birth, though I did not have the births that I now know are possible, I was like, pain is communication. So like we produce pain we perceive it as pain. And so if our perception can change about that, then we can feel something different. So that's where when you were like, can this not be so painful? I was like, let's try it.
Yeah. But
I will have to say, I did not expect.
That's so funny because you guys played a really solid game. Like your guys' space, which I think helped. Because if you guys were like, yeah, it might work, it might not, that would have affected the way that I went into it. But you guys were like, it's going to work. Even if you don't think it'll work, it works. And so that put confidence in me.
Because that's what
you
we
were
believe.
Confident. Yeah.
But then I don't think I was thinking through it.
Yeah.
About oh, wait, this actually has implications for changing the way that we bring children into the world. And then after that, that opened up a can of worms. And I got a lot more curious about birth in general. And you opening that door, then there was a flood of people coming in.
So cool.
For birth sessions. And then I got to do all of this kind of on the ground research of how much our lives and upbringings and childhoods and relationships with our own mothers and all of these other factors play into how we birth babies. I would not have thought that. So Thank you.
Are you kidding me? Thank you. That was amazing.
And then after that, so then that you were like, whoa. And that I feel like kind of opened you up to some other maybe utilizations of mind change. And then I remember we worked on some other things. What do you remember we worked on next?
Well, you're saying not about birth?
Not about birth, right? Because
Yeah.
you were like, whoa, if this worked for this.
Yeah, what about this?
This might actually work for anything.
Yes, totally. I mean, there's still more to the other births too, which we should go back to, like
Yes,
the
I
fourth
wanna
and
circle
fifth
back.
birth. But in regards to something that wasn't about birth, I was doing pterygium, which
Yes.
is something that's very common for light-skinned, light-haired, light eyes people that live in the tropics, because especially in a high wind place, which I very much lived in, a very windy tropical place in the particular location. I mean, I don't live in that same city now, but it's still the same thing. It's like in the tropics, in the heat and everything. And so it's when the white part of your eye grows over the iris and it gets red. I think that's the right way to explain it. I could be wrong though. And my eye was constantly red, and I just chalked it up to, it's because I live in this hot, tropical, windy place and I have light eyes and light hair. So that's just what happens. And a lot of people have pterygium on the island. And so that's what I chalked it up to. But I think I might have brought it up to you at some point. And you're like, oh yeah, we could, let me look it up. Let me figure out what that's associated with. And then you brought it to my attention. I don't remember now, because a lot of times when we do a session, I like that the memory is completely gone.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what we worked on, but you said something and it just hit me. I was in a really strong spot. Like, oh yes, that is something that's a tender spot for me. Do you remember what it was?
I vaguely remember that it had to do with the way you saw yourself, but through the way you thought other people were seeing you. So allowing the way that other people were seeing you to affect the way you saw yourself.
Yes.
And it was your, correct me if I'm wrong, left eye?
I don't even remember now.
Yeah, I know, it's so gone. I think it was your left eye.
I don't remember.
Anyway, and that helped me understand that it was a self thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now that's the funny thing about this work. I was not really super familiar with that, I hadn't worked with anybody with that in particular, but I'd worked with people with eye things before. In fact, a woman who was legally blind who we worked with, and then she could see. I know it sounds like pain-free birth, right? Whatever.
Yeah, no, it sounds even more so like, what?
I know. But so I knew enough about the eyes, and then with some of my resources and stuff like that, kind of looking deeper into it. And then I remember in the beginning, you were like, I don't really know. I don't know. That doesn't sound like it.
Oh, did I?
In the very beginning.
Okay, I don't remember that.
Then I asked the questions that we do as we get in, and then it was like,
oh, there it is.
It was really clear. It was really clear in some of the current things that were happening. But then the next step was looking about how that had been a pattern clear back from childhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so we worked on that. And I think we worked on it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then within a week, you were like, I think it might be getting a little bit better.
I don't remember that. I just remember like for a couple months being like, I don't know if it worked. And then after like 3 or 4 months, I was like, wait, it's gone. Like it's literally gone. Like I didn't even know. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but it just disappeared. And I had this for years.
Yes.
Like 4 or 5 years, 4 years maybe.
Yeah.
So
I remember you called me and you're like, I think it's a little better.
Yeah. It might have been that. I might have just like been really paying attention to it at first.
Yeah, and that's what you said. You said, maybe I'm just paying more attention to it now than I normally do.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of forgot about it.
Yeah. And then it just went away.
And then
it was one session.
Yeah, one session.
That was so crazy and such a blessing, because it was really irritating to always have a red eye.
Yeah, and it was obvious to look at you and see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was so wonderful.
So that was one step. And then and then you got pregnant again.
Yep.
And I loved your view on that when you were like, okay, the last one, your power was so clear that you understood how much you had to do with the whole thing. Because then you just were like, all right, let's really do this.
Yeah.
Like, I want this to be.
Yes.
And you just started laying it out, which I loved to see you step into that. How would you explain that experience?
Well, the fourth one, I really realized that when we had done the mind change stuff, we didn't focus at all on the pushing. Because in my first two, the pushing felt like comparatively not a big deal compared to the labor. So I didn't really feel a need to work on the pushing because the labor was so hard. And then when my third came and it was so much easier, when the pushing came, it actually all of a sudden hurt really, really bad because we didn't work on it at all.
Right.
And compared to the labor, it was excruciating. And so this fourth one, I said, okay, we got to work on the pushing. Like we got to work on something there. So we did a lot of work on the pushing.
Yes.
And then I also wanted to have like a day birth for that one. And looking back now, we realized that we didn't focus that much on it, even though I really wanted it, because all my other births were at night. And it might seem trivial, but it really got to a point where at fourth birth, let's really try to get exactly everything. And I love photography. I love videography. So in the natural light, you can see everything better in the squishy baby and everything like that. So in hindsight, we didn't work that much on it.
But do you remember why?
Because we were working so much on the pushing.
It was that piece of it you weren't yet fully, you felt like it was like it was trivial. Like you just said it again, like it was trivial, or maybe it was a little like.
So I must still hold on to something there by when I explain it, thinking, oh, someone's going to think that's stupid.
That's it. You were holding back giving it to yourself because you thought other people may not understand it.
Yeah.
So you never really pushed it forward as a desire, as big of a desire as it was.
Yeah. And I didn't think it through totally well and realize my power in controlling like when labor started, because I was having Braxton Hicks for like 2 weeks with this birth that I'd never had with the other one. So I couldn't really tell when labor was going to start, whereas the other ones, it just started. Mm-hmm. And so the day that I gave birth, the Braxton Hicks just started getting stronger and longer. And like later in the day, I was playing a board game and I was like, oh, wait, this feels different. Like it's still happening. So it was like 2:30 in the afternoon, I think, at that point. And so I had to make a decision. Do I go for it and give birth before sunset, or do I try to hold on to it until the next day? And I was like, okay, I can do this. Let's just get it kickstarted. Like, let's just make it happen in 4 hours. I was overly confident, I think. And then I gave birth like right after the sunset, like 30 minutes after. But the pushing phase was a lot easier for that one. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't. So then the 5th time around, I was like, this is my number one goal, is a day birth.
Yes.
It was my number one. So like I talked it over my midwife. We had plans about how if I felt it in the evening, I'm going to just go lay down and rest and hold it on till the morning. And that's exactly what I did. Like I was woken up at night. I kept waking up to it. I'm like, just hold on till 6 a.m. and then we'll get going. Just hold on. And then I did. I gave birth at like 11 or 12 in the morning, or 12 in the afternoon. Yeah. And it was perfect. And I was so happy. It was amazing.
So I've talked to a lot of people, and you are which I love, that there's such a great example. And I hear it all, I want to birth like Ellen. I want to birth like Ellen. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's important for people to understand that you've put the work in behind that. Like you really were intentional. You've looked at the things that were holding you back. Like you did put the work in for each one of these births.
Yeah. I think with my first 2, I checked things off my list. Like, okay, I did the hypnobirthing class and I did this and I got everything set up for my home birth kit. So birth is going to be easy. Like that was just, I'm different and I'm going to be able to do it this way. You know, that was consciously. Subconsciously, I obviously didn't believe that. But the last 3, it was so much. I embodied it everywhere, every day, thinking about it in such a important way in my day, knowing my power. And once I started going into labor in my 5th one, then it started to get intense. I was like, oh, I remember this. Here we go. Okay, buckle down. Let's do this. And because it's the most intense thing you'll ever do in your life. I mean, that was my experience. Even with it being easier and not considering it painful, it still was so intense. And you're birthing a baby out of your body. So it's that intentional choice to lean into it, let go, and enjoy it. It's that conscious and subconscious decision to go towards it and not run away from it. And so over those course of those 5 births, like there's so much that I learned in addition to mind change stuff that I wish was worded in a certain way in the birth books that I never heard. Like there were certain things that I realized after I was at my friend Corey's birth, because I went to my sister's first birth and my friend Chelsea's birth. And once it was at Corey's birth, because it was a quiet understanding, certain things that are kind of associated with mind change, but not fully. It's like outside of it. That I didn't really know how to put into words until I was like helping another friend out with it, that I had never heard in certain ways in books.
Yeah. And we were at that birth together.
Yeah, that was so amazing. She's amazing. That was a beautiful birth.
Yes. Okay. For the people out there that might be thinking, pushing back on this a little bit, what would be your difference between intense and pain? Because I think some people out there think You're just using the word
just-
intense.
Yes.
So that you're not saying painful, but you mean the
Yes.
same thing.
Yes. No, it's not the same thing at all. Agony and being in pain is so different than a good, intense feeling, like the hardest workout you ever did or amazing sex where it's like super vigorous, right? Like it's going to be very different feelings than agony and pain. So that's the difference.
What do you think is the biggest takeaway from all of that? Like shifting out of the agony and pain into power and being there for the intensity of it. Like, what does that do for you? What does it do as a mother? What does it do? Do you think it has an impact on the baby?
I mean, I don't know. That one I don't have an answer for. If it has an impact on the baby, I mean, I hear that it does, but I don't have any. I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
It probably does.
I can't imagine, like, especially the mother and the baby are obviously so connected that
I think it's probably so subconscious and like generational that it's probably really hard to pinpoint specifically.
yeah.
You know?
But I think
Yeah, go. Tell me.
that the energy, that the vibration that is produced from agony and pain versus intensity, power, intention, love, these different words that we hear from empowered births. I can't imagine that doesn't have an impact on the baby.
Oh, totally. And it's not me being skeptical. It's more just like me not having any kind of proof.
Right, like
You know?
like scientific things
Yeah,
to
like
back it
I
up.
don't know, but it does feel it's super nice to come into this peaceful environment. But the thing is, every birth is so important and beautiful, and you're just the end result is beautiful.
Yes.
It's just empowering and amazing, especially if you're supported by the people that you're around.
Yeah. There's a lot of out there, I think rightfully so, because we understand, we've heard a lot of stories that birth is trauma. There's a lot of people who are carrying birth trauma now. What do you think where do you think that comes from? What's the most traumatic thing about that?
Trauma for the mother or for the baby?
For the mother, I think.
Yeah, well, it's disappointment if you didn't get what you were hoping for, one of the biggest events in your life. And if it's kind of like your wedding day. If your wedding doesn't go the way that you had hoped, like it can feel, I mean, wedding day and birth is different, but it's a similar type of analogy where something so important and life-changing and pivotal and vulnerable, because you're in the most vulnerable state of your life, that things can come in a lot more sensitively if something traumatic can happen. I mean, even with me and my fourth birth where it was at night, I felt things where I was like, oh, I'm bummed about that. And Andrew was like, why are you bummed about that? What are you doing? This birth was beautiful, Ellen. And I'm like, I know it was, but right? It's just, and that was so small, let alone someone who truly was taken advantage of at their birth or wasn't treated respectfully, and traumatic things like when a baby's taken away from the mother when it's not necessary or life threatening or anything like that. That's traumatic, because your birth is so important and you're so vulnerable and it's your baby, the most primal thing, an event in your life. So it's so important to do work to help you have the highest likelihood of a birth where you're not going to feel trauma from it.
And do you feel like that's because you obviously put a big focus now on birth. You've got the Empowered Birth course, which is amazing and beautiful and has helped so many women already. Do you feel like that the shift in the difference that you felt in your third, fourth, and fifth births were really, like, you wanted to share that information? Was that a pivotal part of that?
I even felt that after the third birth, but everything happens the way it's supposed to. And I learned so much since then, even going into the fifth birth. And I mean, I don't know, I've only had 5 babies compared to, midwives where they are there for hundreds of births. And so that's why I had other experts involved in the birth course, including you. And I'm so thankful for how it turned out. I love the experts that are in that course. I have a wonderful friend named Haley Callahan who's a doula, and she helped with so much for those who are choosing a hospital setting and how to have an empowered birth at a hospital and other things like that. So
that's an important note is you chose to have your births at home, and that was a great and beautiful choice for you. And there, for various reasons, not everyone's able to do that or doesn't even choose that.
Or doesn't want that. Yeah, everyone should give birth wherever they feel safest.
Yes.
You know?
And that, but to be able to do it empowered.
Yeah, totally.
In a hospital environment.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to help.
Yes, I've gotten so many messages of women who chose a hospital birth and had a really empowering experience, and it makes me so happy for them.
One of my clients is one of those people that after watching you, she had a very, her first birth was quite traumatic, therefore wanted to do some work around it, and then had the second birth, chose to do it at the hospital, but she sent, one of the pictures she sent me was of her OB sitting in the corner with his arms crossed because she's like, this is my favorite picture because this is the example of how he let me do it in the hospital all by myself. And he was just cheering her on over there in the corner, just sitting there. And that, you know, just the examples that women have been able to see outside of the stories maybe we've been told generation after generation are just opening the doors for people to have different experiences. Yeah,
because a lot of women think that birth is like you're at the will of the hospital staff and whatever they say, and you're just like not in your body and your power, and it's actually your choice. It's no one can do something to you, you know, and you can choose to stop and not let that happen and be empowered in that way. And I think it just comes to education.
It's so much about education because there are women, I felt like I was one of those women without the knowledge that I did have a choice. I didn't think I did. Like, I just didn't think I did. I thought I was under and it's authoritarian stuff. It's a whole other, not just birth.
Yes.
There's a lot that plays into that.
Yeah.
When I come into that establishment and I just really give over my body.
Yes, like the not trusting yourself and your body. And of course, it's so amazing to have medical staff there for emergencies, but that's what they're there for. They're supposed to be there for emergencies, not for normal birth. There's an interview I did on my podcast with Dr. Stuart Fishbein, and he is an OBGYN that advocates for home birthing. And he, in California, for years would go to home births with midwives attending for twin and breech births because legally you couldn't have a home birth, or a midwife couldn't attend a home birth without an OBGYN there if it was twin or breech. And very few OBGYNs know how to deliver twin and breech births now. So he would attend home births for that. And he's so passionate about how just empowering the woman, and that like an OBGYN is trained for emergencies, not for normal birth, which is the majority of birth if we aren't meddling with birth.
Right.
Yeah.
The meddling.
Yes.
I think that us educating, having tools helps us get out of our own way sometimes and just really be in the body's ability to do this.
Yeah, because we can kind of think going into birth, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like the midwife, the doctor, they know what to do. But really, when like a generation of women can start encouraging other women that you can and you are capable of this, and you are powerful enough to know how to birth your baby, that you don't need a doctor to tell you what position to get in and whether you should be leaning back with stirrups, or whether like if you want to go lean over a medicine ball and sway your hips, like your body probably wants to do that. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I love that. Is illustrated so well at the birth that you both of us attended with our friend Corey, because I was there for the whole thing. And there was a point where I was like, it's time for Ellen to get here. And when you came in, it changed everything. Like Corey will say that too. The way you were able to speak to her in your knowledge, in your embodied experience, it just kickstarted everything for her, what she needed at the time. And she had a great support staff. Like everyone was there in a capacity that I think really helped. But you bringing that in and being able to like look at her and say what you said to her at the time, just...
Well, it was what I wished I heard in my first two births.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's not like I did anything. She just finally had the tools to do it herself, because when women can support each other and share our experiences, that can help them through their own birth. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But she did it. She, like, I had nothing to do with it. It was like, she did it. Once she was like, oh, this is what I need to do. Okay, doing it. And then she gave birth within like 2 hours.
Right. But you were there carrying the information that you had cultivated and then passed down. And those experiences have changed my life. Seeing the way that women, I feel like, are meant to be there for one another, passing down our knowledge and those tools and those tips. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And, you know, many more people have been able to experience that through you sharing all of this in the course.
Thank you.
Through all of the experts and everything that you learned in creating the course, were there any aha moments? I mean, you've had 5 babies.
Yeah.
But did you still feel like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, and, you know, I wish I would have known this? And...
Oh yeah, like the biggest aha moment, or one of the biggest ones, is something that you're always told, especially in home birthing, that, you know, don't hide from the pain, go towards it, don't run away from it, you need to go towards it. And like that, I didn't understand what that meant. The way that was worded, like, didn't make sense to me. So I didn't get it, you know, until I realized the words that, okay, these positions where you feel it the most, that's where you want to be. Don't go run away from those positions. Don't go curl up in a ball on your bed where you don't feel it as much, because then that makes labor take longer. That delays labor. I had no idea. I thought I was just this passive passenger along for the ride, and it'll happen when it happens in the first 2 births, you know? Not realizing that my midwives were trying to explain to me, like, you need to go towards it. And it wasn't, for some reason it didn't compute. So that wording is really helpful to me for my last 3 births of wherever you feel it the most, that's where you need to be. Stay right there. As soon as it gets so intense, where you're like, oh, this is so intense and I want to get out of it. Nope, stay right there. And then relax your muscles there and use all that mind change work to relax and trust and open up to it, enjoy it. And anything that helps you to let it in and to relax those birthing muscles rather than tightening. Because when you tighten and you retreat, that's what makes baby take longer. Your baby wants to come down. Whenever you feel it the most, that's when baby's trying to come down. Yeah. And I didn't realize that. I was like, oh, don't like that. Go somewhere else. Meanwhile, why is it taking so long? You know, like but I was going to the places where I didn't feel it as much. Because your baby, you need to, once you feel it, that's when baby's coming down. So relax right there. And then it does start to feel better.
And we think something's wrong.
Yeah.
That's
yes. Oh, something wrong? Why is this happening? No, baby's coming down. Now you need to let it happen. Relax and let it happen instead of retreating.
It's funny that you say it that way, because I feel like that could sum up mind change. Mm-hmm. Like, we go to where the resistance is, where it's the strongest, where it feels like you could never go.
Yeah.
And then we're just there for seconds.
Yes.
And it's the presence of being there. Finally, the body just wants to be heard. Mm-hmm. It just wants to be in partnership with you. And the running away from it, you know, up in our heads, doing other things, coping around it, is what prolongs the torture, the pain.
Yes. And that's why mind change is so, I think, helpful in addition and in accordance with all the other things that can help you have an easier and an empowered birth. Because without the mind change work, you're doing the motions, but the back of your head and your subconscious is telling you, oh, no, this is not safe. I can't do this, or I can't, whatever the thing you're telling, whatever the thing is for you that you tell yourself, you know, subconsciously. So that's why the mind change work, both in my course that you're part of, but also your own course, having that extra, I think, is really helpful.
Because birth is physiological.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's going,
it's going to happen.
It's a subconscious program, really, that we're after. Mm-hmm. And if there's glitchy things in the subconscious program, that's going to show up in in that part of it, because it is more of a physiological, like our breathing and our temperature regulation, digestion, all of that. Yeah.
But back to the trauma thing, I do think it is such an interesting topic, because really it is how you look at things. So for me, where I'm being like, oh man, my fourth birth is at night, my husband's outlook was that was a beautiful birth. You just did that so easily. It was like, what was it, 5 hours long? That was incredible. Ellen, you were amazing. Like, it's all your perception. And someone else, you know, might have expected an easy birth, and maybe it was really painful and maybe they felt trauma from it. But if they shifted their outlook to it about how they perceive birth, and they choose to look at it as like, this is normal and it's okay, then that might heal the trauma, and that's okay too.
Yes.
You know?
I love it. I think changing and empowering women in the birth process really does have the power to change the world.
Yeah.
Because if we're bringing people in, you know, if the stories of birth, of our origin, are these stories of power and amazing things, then it really starts setting the tone for how we look at the world and how we think we came in with all this power and all this intensity and intentionality.
Yes.
I feel like it sort of starts our story that way.
Yes.
Versus if it's a disempowered and it was a victimized start.
And that's why it's so important to acknowledge how important every birth is, even the traumatic ones, even the really hard ones. Like, your birth is amazing. You birthed your baby. That's the most important thing. And you're in the club too, you know? Like, 'cause I think that might be something that people might feel bitter if they had this really hard traumatic birth, and then, you hear of, this person, so-and-so, their birth was easy. Like, that might feel triggering. Maybe because they might feel like they're not part of the club, but that's not true. Like, you are part of the club. Every woman who has birthed, like, all before us and today, like, it's all important and all worth mentioning.
And I think a lot of what I've seen in my work, so just from that scope, is that those stories that people often find that are traumatizing and that they're really keep being traumatized by the birth story are actually stories that tend to resonate from their childhood too. They were victimized in this way and they weren't listened to and they didn't, they weren't respected in this way, or those. And oftentimes those are actually stories from childhood. And in one sense, it's a double traumatization of, I already have felt like this my whole life, and now I'm bringing a new life into this world and this happened to me again.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that in the work we do, we can even go back and heal things that have happened before and rewire all of those things, and it can set people's bodies free and minds free. And so I love that we've partnered together in this. You were the beginning of all of this for me.
I mean, that's how I feel about you.
And so anything else, like with the birth course, that you feel like you want to communicate to, if there's a woman out there? Because I do think there's also some people think we want to make stories about, well, that's just Ellen. Ellen has everything, and of course she has these births this way. And like, there's some, like you said, special club or some way that they get this. But what would you say to the woman out there thinking maybe she's on the outside and doesn't have and isn't able, and it's just you?
I would say, I think social media can have a tendency to do that because, and fault of my own too. Like, that's not the right way to say it, but it's also my fault too, because people who are putting their lives out online and a lot of people are looking, it's really hard to just be like 100% you and vulnerable, right? Like, you're showing some version of yourself and the best version of yourself. And I do my best to be honest and show the hard parts of what I'm going through, but also I think it's okay to sometimes protect yourself and not be like, this is everything I'm going through, world, listen to it. There's that okay too. So just being aware that, like, I'm not different to you. You can do the birth that you want. I'm not special. Just that.
Yeah. I think you're special.
I'm not any more special than anybody listening.
Right. Yeah. They can have it too.
It's just social media has that impact, tends to have that reaction if we can look at everybody's lives that they're sharing online with some kind of understanding that, like, they're going to share what they want to share, and it's not everything. And be okay with that too, that people can share as much or as little vulnerability as they want, and it's up to what they want to share. And I try to, like, my sister's really good at being vulnerable online. I'm like, oh girl, I mean, I wouldn't share that, but okay. But it's very receptive, because that's actually how people connect with you, is they, this whole fake, you're perfect type thing is not interesting.
Right.
It's really not interesting, because nobody's actually like that. And so I do my best, and there's certain things that I feel comfortable sharing and certain things not, but I'm not perfect. I'm not, we all struggle. And I guess that's the only thing.
I think it's very vulnerable to put out as much birth content as you have. I mean, people watch you give birth.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I definitely put out vulnerable content. I think it's just more, it's easy, like you said, for someone to be like, oh, Ellen, and she's this and she's that. And I'm sharing my best parts of my life, but having 5 kids, and I'm trying to, create space of protection and not share so much. Like, it's just, I think it's okay to just share the amount that you feel comfortable sharing, just being mindful that, like, nobody is 100% sharing everything.
Right, of course.
Yeah, that there's nothing different.
Nor should we, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Everything.
Yeah.
Because we feel something different from one moment to the
Yeah.
next. Like that's a wild ride.
Yeah. And it's really education and information when it comes to this birth topic of, oh, Ellen can do it, but I can't do it. No, you can do it. It's that information. I mean, look at my first 2 births. Look at that. It was so long. If you saw me, I wish I had video of those first 2. Anyone who's deciding whether they should have a videographer or photographer, do it. I mean, at least for me, I really wish I had them the first 2 times. I cherish all the last 3 of my births that I have video content of it and photos. I wish I could show you what my first 2 were like. I was just totally just angry and sad and mad and in agony, you know? So, but what I learned changed the way that I could do birth. And even in my 5th birth, when I started to realize, oh, here it comes. Do you remember that intensity? I could have gone that direction where I'm like, okay, oh, I can't believe it. This is so hard. I could have gone there. But I chose a different direction, and it was very intentional. That required a lot of subconscious neural wiring.
Yeah.
You know?
And even if you had chosen the other route, there would be a good reason for that.
Totally.
So if there's women out there that are like, no,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a client recently that, it's such an amazing story. They're all such beautiful stories. And she had a planned home birth, hospital transfer, but not an emergency, and had a successful, VBAC really done naturally. So beautiful. And yet, again, she was beating herself up just over the hospital transfer part, but then realizing that was actually answering a call that she had subconsciously. She, in one sense, loved the idea of having that support that she felt at the hospital.
Yeah.
And she got it.
Yep, exactly.
And it was actually a victory.
Yes.
And she needed that at the time. And that's okay. So I think there's just so much more room for us to be gracious with ourselves. That's the thing I feel most, is we're hearing your story. Such a great thing. Like a little bit of disappointment around the time that it happened. We just tend to be geared towards like, what else could I have done better?
Yeah.
And we just need to have a lot more grace with ourselves. And
yeah.
If we understand the absolute magic power that is happening with us giving birth in that way, I think that'll kind of take care of that to some degree.
Yeah. No, it's totally all about how you look at it. Because when I look at my 4th birth, if I look back at exactly everything else, it was incredible how quickly I chose to do it and how I just told my body what to do and when, and I felt so empowered, and with Andrew right there, and it just was amazing. So yeah, it's all how we look at it, half glass full, half empty, whatever.
Yeah. And that, I believe, comes a lot from our subconscious mind. It's like if you I'm trying to look at it half full, and yet all I see is it half empty, that's going to show up at some point. But we can go back and mess around and everything. Well, thank you. You have changed my life.
Aw. You changed my life.
So many levels.
I love you.
I love you too. And I'm really grateful that you are doing what you're doing, that you've done it in your own body. You're not just talking about it. You've done it in your own body. You've found other people. You've gotten so many resources. And you have this incredible tool for women, men, people, like anyone who wants to know how you come into this world in a way that's empowered. This is a great thing for people.
Thank you so much. I feel that way about everything you guys put out. It's life-changing. It really is.
Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. I'm sure we'll do this again.
Yes.
There's so many wonderful things to talk about.
That sounds good.
But love you.
Love you too. Bye.